Hey YouTube, Kimanya, I am Sha.
And I'm Ju. Together we are
Sha and Ju. Welcome back to our channel. So today we'll be making Taiwanese beef noodle soup. We've had it all over Taiwan. Our friends brought us to many different places and we loved it.
So much.
There's two main different types of Taiwanese beef noodle soup. There's a dark broth one.
Called Hong Shao.
And there's a light broth one.
Called Quing Dun.
The dark broth one has a little more character, is a little more heavy, is a little deeper in flavor, and has a little added spice touch to it. But the other one is equally as good, don't get me wrong. But today we'll be making the dark broth one because this is the one that me and Ju prefer.
Exactly. Just to tell you a little bit more about the background of the dish itself, ironically the Taiwanese never used to eat beef at all before the Second World War. I know, what's wrong with them? No, just joking. It wasn't until after the Second World War when Chinese mainland soldiers came to the island and brought their flavors as well as ingredients to Taiwan. And then of course with the fusion of ingredients created a whole new dish called Taiwanese beef noodle soup as we know it today. It originated more so from the Kaohsiung area in the south of Taiwan, but then evolved of course throughout the whole of the island, making a lot of different versions of the dish as we already spoke about.
In Taiwan you can get many different cuts of beef in your beef noodle soup, but they mainly use the beef shank. I will be using beef ribs. This meat you kind of need to marinate a day ahead of time, so in total it's going to be a 2-day process. And then we're going to have wheat noodles and only green onions. We're going to keep the garnishes simple because we want to portray the beef and the beef stock in there.
So before we get into the video showcasing this very beautiful traditional Taiwanese dish, we just wanted to make sure you like the video. If you're enjoying yourself today, subscribe to our channel of course. Please do to support us going forward, and make sure you have your notifications turned on to always to make sure you're not missing out on any of the beautiful content we have prepared for you. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Lunes, yo me llamo Tarzán y la gente me dice ¿cómo es? El rey de la selva. Jane es perfecta gracias a sus raíces. ¿Sabes cómo es? El rey de la selva. Ando con mis leones cazando los ciervos. ¿Cómo es? El rey de la selva. Yo soy jefe de leones a cerdo. ¿Cómo es? El rey de la selva.
The very first step of making Taiwanese beef noodle soup is obviously having the beef. I like having my beef marinated a day ahead. Remember, the more you marinate the beef, the more flavor the beef is going to have. So to start, we are going to add salt and pepper. Half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, a third of a teaspoon of MSG, quarter of a teaspoon onion powder, quarter of a teaspoon garlic powder, third of a teaspoon of chili flakes, 2 cloves, 2 to 3. I got 3, so I'm going to put 3. A piece of mace. If you guys don't know what mace is the flour that surrounds the nutmeg before it dries. So I'm going to put half of this in there. A piece of cinnamon bark, half a teaspoon of brown sugar, and soy sauce. For the soy sauce, you want to be adding around, I would say, 3 teaspoons. And now we're just going to mix everything together. I am using around a pound of beef in here. And I am using some dark soy sauce. Feel free to use a light soy sauce if you want. Just remember, we're just flavoring it. Tomorrow we're gonna be grilling this. So after a few minutes of mixing, your beef should be evenly coated now. It should look a little brownish, it should smell fantastic, and it should look great. What you want to do at this point is put them in a Ziploc bag. I like using plastic Ziploc bags so it holds the flavor better. I want to make sure that this bag is tight, so that your beef doesn't have a lot of space to move around. Press it down. I make sure there's a hole in my Ziploc bag so all the air comes out. As much as you can, take the air out, and voila, we're gonna put this in the fridge overnight and let's see how it looks in the morning. So today is day 2 of our beef noodle soup adventure. Yesterday we deboned the meat, We marinated it and we put it in the fridge overnight. So today we will be working on the broth itself. It will be a soupy, thick broth that we'll be using for our beef noodle soup. For your beef noodle soup base, you will be needing 800 grams of beef bones, 100 milliliters of dark soy sauce, 200 milliliters of cooking rice wine. You will also need a tomato, a full carrot, half an onion, a full head of garlic sliced into two. We also have some salt. We're going to be using at least 2 pieces of star anise, 4 or 5 grams of Sichuan pepper depending on how spicy you want it. The Sichuan pepper, if you don't know what it looks like, it's this red peppercorn. It's usually native to China and Taiwan. It's very spicy. It's also grown in other parts of the world for its spiciness. And some fennel seeds, about 3 to 4 grams. If you don't know what fennel seeds look like, they look like small grains of rice. They smell like licorice and they have a very light licorice texture and flavor. We will also be using a beef bouillon cube. To start your beef noodle soup broth, make sure you have a pot on and make sure your pot is warm before you start putting in the bones, because you don't want the bones to boil. Drop the bones, make sure they're sizzling as soon as you put them in. We're gonna roast all the bones on one side for 4 to 5 minutes before we flip them. Chef Sha's top tip: before you flip the bones over, we're gonna flip them around. How do you know when the bones are ready to flip around? Is when you grab them and you lift them off, they should come clean. They should feel no struggle. They should like just unstick from the pan and not stick to the bottom of it. See? Just like this. Like, it's easy to flip. Boom. Boom. We will now be flipping the bones over. Again, they should come clean off the pan. As you can see, they're perfectly brown and uniform on all the sides. We're gonna do the same thing for the other sides of the bones now. Remember, we're gonna let them cook for a bit and then we're gonna flip them around and still let them cook for a bit. By doing that also, we're releasing all the beef fat that we're gonna use to cook the vegetables after. Now that our bones are roasted, we're gonna transfer them to a pot where we're gonna cook them into a broth later. We are going to start with the hardest vegetables, which is the carrot right now. We are going to caramelize this. The reason I didn't peel it is because we're not going to eat this carrot. We're only going to use it in the soup. And it has a little more flavor. The peel is a little tougher and it's going to keep the carrot all together instead of turning it into a mush in your soup base. I've done the same with the onion. I've just cut it. You want to keep the bottom of it so it keeps everything together. I've also not peeled it. One great chef, Bernard Loiseau, used to use his peels of his onions in all his brown stocks. He would never use peels of white onions. So that's why I don't usually peel my onions for any soup base that I make. Same for the garlic. I actually just cut it in half. And we're going to add all of this to our pot. Let it cook very slowly. Now that our vegetables are roasted, we're going to transfer them over to the same pot where we had the beef. As you can see, make sure that all your vegetables are colored properly. They look a little brown, but not burnt.
Hey Sha, what's happening with the tomatoes though?
The tomatoes, I don't want to cook them yet. They're going to be the last thing that we want to cook because they're so soft and they're going to give out a lot of water. I want to be able to roast my veggies in that oil first before we deglaze everything. I mean, unstick everything that's on the bottom of this pan so we can use it in our beef broth. Okay. So we're going to put 4 grams of Sichuan pepper and 3 grams of fennel seeds to toast. I'm also adding my 2-star anise as promised. Most people will like to toast their spices first before they start searing their bones. But I think that by doing them separately, doing the bones first and then achieving spices last will help you differentiate the flavors. So the beef will taste like beef, the vegetables will taste like vegetables, and the spices will taste like spices. You can differentiate that in the broth instead of having everything smell like spice. After a minute or two, your spices should have soaked enough in your warm oil. We're going to transfer them over to that big pot. Now you also want to transfer everything. By that I mean the oil as well. So all the beef fat that was on the bottom of your pot will go in your soup pot right now. Now that we already have transferred the spices over, I'm gonna use my beef bouillon so it absorbs the rest of the fat and it catches all the flavor that was stuck on the bottom of this pan. And since Ju was asking earlier what's gonna happen to the tomatoes, this is when they get put into play, Ju.
Yes, my poor tomato. They're my favorites besides green onion, you know.
Yeah.
I was worried.
So all you want to do now is just take the tomato and leave it in the bottom of your pan on a very low heat. The tomato is going to release some juices. As you can see, if I rub it on like a spot that was stuck earlier, it's coming off slowly. So that's what we want the tomato to do right now before we transfer everything in the pot and get the broth going later. You will notice that your tomatoes are done when you see that the bottom of your pan is clear. So there's nothing stuck to the bottom of it. So we are going to transfer those tomatoes over into our big pot, just like previously. And you also want to catch all the sauce and everything that's left in this pan and transfer it to the big pot. We have one last step for this pot. We are going to deglaze it with our rice cooking wine and soy sauce. While the soy sauce and wine mixture is boiling away, we are going to start to make our main beef stock. For that we will be using some beef stock that I previously had in the fridge and some hot water. The reason why I'm using this beef stock that I previously had in the fridge is because it's going to reinforce my broth. It's going to make my broth be more concentrate and have more layers of flavor. But if you don't have beef stock that you previously made, hot water is fine. Now we are going to pour all of our beef stock in the beef stock. As you can see, our beef stock is really fatty. It has lots of fat.
The more fat, the more flavor, I guess.
Right. The more fat, the more flavor. And we're going to fill it up all the way to 3/4, I would say, to the pot. Remember, you still need to leave some pot for everything to twirl around and mix around and cook around. And you also need to leave some space for the soy and wine mix. Once our soy mixture starts to simmer, we are going to transfer it over to our big pot and let this pot cook for the next 4 to 5 hours. Once this starts boiling, turn it down to a slow medium heat. You also want to skim all the impurities that come up. Use a strainer, but make sure that you don't always strain all your spices out. As you can see, I have been skimming my broth for the past 2 hours. The broth has reduced quite a lot. It has gone a little darker. As you can see, the spices have lost their color, the vegetables have lost their color. So now is the time to add 2 important ingredients. So Chef Sha's top tip is brown sugar is the first ingredient. And the second ingredient is salt. I learned this trick back in Taiwan. Because sugar was considered as a form of wealth, people used to make their dishes sweet to show that they had money. So this is how this came along. I was told to add sugar in my beef noodle soup base by one of my good friends, Chester. So
shout out.
Shout out. So we added around 2 teaspoons of sugar And now we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt. Now that our noodle base has cooked for 4 hours, we are going to strain it. We are going to remove everything that's in there and pass it through a small strainer so there's no sediments in your soup. It needs to be clear. We'll go through that process together. For that, you can use a bowl and a strainer and then get everything out. I would suggest proceeding this way just because there's bones. If you do it in the strainer in the sink, you could really burn yourself. So the small strainer wasn't working out for me. It was too small for the amount of soup that I made, so I just decided to use a bigger strainer. As you can see, there's still components in your soup that needs to come out. I'm gonna strain all of this through. All the way to the bottom.
So like dark and deep.
Give this a shake because you don't want to lose anything. And this is the base of your beef broth. So now that you have your beef broth ready, we are going to proceed with the meat, the noodles, and the garnish. Remember the beef that we marinated yesterday? It's been sitting in the fridge overnight, slowly fermenting and slowly gaining more flavor. We are also going to use 1 pound of Shanghai noodles. We prefer the Shanghai noodles because it has a good elasticity to it and it has a good chew on it, I find. We have a green pepper cracker and we have a special pepper cracker here.
Yeah.
It contains Carolina Reapers and smoked ghost peppers. I'm going to use that to make our chili oil. The chili oil I'm making today is made with beef fat. So when I cooked the stock yesterday, whatever was on top, when it cooled down, I gathered it and this is it. To start off, follow me outside, we'll go grill this lovely pieces of meat. So make sure you turn your grill on first. Let it warm up properly, give it a brush, and bring your meat out. So we're gonna start by placing the meat on the grill. The reason why I do that is because I like the smoky flavor and the little charred pieces that are gonna come out in your noodles later. I'll show you this. So let's cook it. As you can see, very hot grill. It's sizzling away already. Like right on, as you put it on, it smells so good right now.
Yes.
Doesn't it? Like right.
Feels like a beautiful summer barbecue.
Right? After 2 to 3 minutes, they should look charred. So that's when you know you should flip them over. Smoky! That's how I like it. So, as you can see, it's all charred. It smells pretty good. It's making me really hungry. We're gonna take them off. We're gonna go back in the kitchen and put them in our pressure cooker. So let's go inside and see it. Your beef is grilled and ready to go. What we want to do now is make sure that the meat is really soft and tender and melting away. The reason why I use a pressure cooker. If you don't know what a pressure cooker does, a pressure cooker will force the humidity into the meat. If you don't have a pressure cooker, get a pot. You will add twice the amount of water that I'm using. You'll put a lid on it and you let it slowly simmer away. This will speed up the process, and my mom has always been using a pressure cooker. That's why I cherish it so much, and it just makes everything quicker. So let's start by putting the beef in. So the beef looks nice and juicy. It looks very charred. It smells so fragrant. Me and Ju actually had a taste of it. What do you think, Ju?
Of course we had to. Yes, it was really awesome. I had a little fatty piece, so it was extra fragrant as well.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna drop everything in here.
So excited for this.
And as I mentioned, I'm gonna add a cup of water. We are going to put this on a high heat until it blows the first time. By blowing, I don't mean like explode. I'm meaning until the whistle goes off. You'll hear it go psh, and then this will go off. As soon as it makes that first sound, we're gonna turn it down and let it simmer for the next 20 minutes. That's when you turn it down. I am going to teach you how to make the chili oil. As you can see, it looks like a peanut butter, but it feels more like a butter that's a little grittier because it's beef fat. So I've actually mushed it down and played around with it a bit so it kind of melts away and melts into this consistency. As you can see, mine is a pretty yellowish color. The reason is usually in Taiwan they would put tomato paste in their beef stock and then they would take the beef fat that's on top of it. Mine didn't turn as red because we put fresh tomatoes. It has the most amazing flavor, but it just has the color. So my top trick here would be to add some paprika, some smoked paprika powder, because you want the smokiness in it. You want the roundness of a flavor and you want just that little kick that the paprika gives. So I'm going to add half a teaspoon of paprika in. I'm also going to add 1/3 of a teaspoon of salt, some cracked pepper according to what you would like, and the special grinder is gonna have, I think, 2 turns. What do you think? 2 or 3 turns?
Yeah, we'll see. I'm getting used to it. Can you see also the little plastic baggie that he put around the grinder so I don't accidentally mistake it for the pepper one?
The Carolina Reaper used to be the hottest pepper in the world. Not anymore.
No, he's always following all the trends of the newest and most hottest chilies in the world.
So this should look like a red butter, almost.
Can you show it to me? Yeah, that's awesome. Yay.
So the meat in there should actually be firm, but still very soft. You want to test it by just poking the meat. If your knife goes through, perfect. I'm going to transfer all this meat into a bowl. We're lightly gonna let this cool down before we slice it. As you can see, the color is very deep and dark. It smells really good. Even if you scoop out a little of the liquid into the bowl, that's fine, but try to keep as much as you can into the pot itself. So at this point, I will suggest adding half a cup of water in your pressure cooker and bring it back to a quick boil. So as soon as it starts to boil, stop it. We are going to strain it into our beef noodle stock. So remember this guy? He has been simmering for the past, not really simmering, but just kept warm for the last 10-15 minutes, I would say. Just gonna strain this broth into this one, just because I don't want any particles in my soup. See, there's still some stuff in the strainer. So once this is strained, you want to just gently bring this one up until it starts simmering slowly, and then you want to bring your water for your noodles to a boiling point because we're going to use them soon. We put our temperature up for the noodle water to boil. While this comes up to a boil, we're going to cut the green onions. Once your water started to boil, drop your noodles in and just give them a few seconds. After 2 to 3 minutes, your noodles should be ready. I like mine al dente. I mean, they still need to have a good bite and a good chew to them. So I'm going to turn this off. We're going to strain these noodles. So now we have everything to assemble our Taiwanese beef noodle soup. We have our noodles, which are steamed. We have our beef fat oil. We have our green onions. We have the trim beef that we recently sliced. And most importantly, the broth. Let's assemble this together. So what you want to do is take the amount of soup that you want to go into your bowl, put it in the bottom of your bowl. It should almost cover all the noodles. Not completely, you should still see the noodles from up top, but you should almost cover all of it. It's really dark, it's really beautiful in the noodles right now. Next up, you want to put the beef. You want to put as much beef out as you want. So the beef, we're gonna add the green onions next.
Look at you assembling with chopsticks too.
Yeah, also if you want more green onions, go ahead and put more green onions, right? And last but not least, the chili oil. Oh my god, look at this. Et voila,
So
this
pretty.
is our beef noodle soup. Et voila, our beef noodle soup is ready. It smells really good. I hope it's gonna taste as amazing. I'm pretty sure actually.
We have high expectations.
We've had it a couple of times since we came back. We've made it a couple of times. We like the dark broth version way better.
The other one's good too, but this one just has a little bit more character and spice to it.
Yeah,
So,
I'm gonna have a
the
piece.
honor first
Yeah.
try. Really tender.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try one.
Oh my god. That beef is so tender and so smoky. The smokiness on the outside always amazes me. This is, you want the char flavor. It's been like grilled or toasted or cooked at a very high heat. But still it's so tender and so smooth, no?
You want to try the broth, Sha?
Yeah, true. I want to try the broth. I'm pretty happy. Oh, with the color of the broth. Oh, wow. But yeah, the soy sauce just comes out like really nice and clear. And you can actually taste all the different layers. Like after you get the spices and you get like the beef bones kind of longing in your mouth.
I love the chili oil you made actually, because that gives it another layer of fat, like you said, another layer of not like crazy spicy, but that hint, you know.
That chili oil, I really like it as well. It's just the good amount of spice. Let's just like mix it together. What do you think, Ju?
Yeah, because I love my noodles, you know. Gotta
Yeah.
get those carbs in.
Sure.
How's
Taste this
it?
and let me
How's
know.
it?
I think it tastes pretty good. Sorry I left my chopsticks in there.
That's okay, I'll use them.
Do you want to have a sip of this in the meantime?
You have it first.
Okay.
I'll have this first.
What do you think?
While I'm having everything dripping all over my face, you
Yeah.
can tell it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Good
That's
job.
really good.
Good job one more time.
Thank you. Oh, do you want to taste this?
Oh yeah.
Well, I have another like small noodle delish.
I was telling Sha, I was like, when we're making this dish, we need to make sure we get the apple cider if we can, and we indeed found it in our Chinese supermarket of our trust. So, it's pretty
We
good.
actually went out shopping looking for this, so
Yes,
we have to make it special, right?
exactly. So we're just gonna, it's a quick snack, so we're just sharing the bowl here as an afternoon snack today. Thank you so much for watching this video. We certainly hope you had a good time with us over the past couple of days.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel, of course, as well as make sure the notifications are turned on. Thank you so much. See you next time. Cheers.
This feels enough, no more. But I'm not going to give up and fall. Rise above the door. Need all my challenges and search for my strength. I defeat them all. I'm never ever gonna hide no more.